Requirements for effective performance in Part 2. Important things to remember for speaking Part 2. Some sample questions and answers. Several questions for practice. And finally, tips to enhance your performance in Part 2 of speaking. Therefore, let us start today's lecture with the requirements for effective performance in Part 2. Firstly, understand the topic carefully when you see the cue card. All the parts of the cue cards are to be answered by you. You are allowed to make notes, so use the 1 minute to frame your speech. It is very important to speak for 2 minutes. You lose scores if you speak for lesser than 1 minute. And when you are preparing, only write the keywords, because if you try to write the entire sentences, you will not have enough time to cover each and every part of the cue card. So, these are the things you require for good performance in Part 2. Now, let us see what Part 2 is mainly concerned with. It mainly tests your ability to speak with little or no hesitation, your ability to give some details about a simple topic, and your ability to use relevant vocabulary and paraphrasing the question while answering. And finally, your ability to use range of different sentence structures that are grammatically correct are also checked. Now let us go through some examples of the questions and answers for Part 2. As you can see on your screen, the first example is, now before explaining, let me tell the statement. Describe a problem that affects the environment in the area where you live. This statement is considered as the prompt or say the topic, and the cue questions are as follows, as you can see. Firstly, what the problem is. Secondly, what causes it. And finally, what people feel about the problem, and explain what you think could be done to solve it. This is your question given on the cue card. Now, make sure that while you prepare notes, you have at least 2 to 3 points for each and every cue question. By doing this, you will have enough content to address each and every part of the cue card. Now, let us see the sample answer for this. In this sample answer, make sure that you refer the bold letters that are usually meant to make your speech smoother, and I'll explain the speech in parts. That means I'll explain the answer for each and every cue question individually. So, to start with the description of first cue question, that is what the problem is, the sample answer is, environmental problem is a very big issue in today's world these days. So, naturally, the place where I live is not immune from it either. Even though the environmental problem my place is facing can be little different from other places. Anyway, the environmental problem that my area is facing today is deforestation. But the majority of the people where I live didn't even know before 10 years that such a problem could actually exist. But they came to a rude awakening when they found out, to their utmost shock, that more than 50% of the trees which once provided them shade and clean air on hot summer day had just vanished. You can see various words that are in bold. These words are less common, and I have also kept some conjunctions and connectors in bold letters. Also, I have elaborated the entire situation. Now, let us move to the content for cue question number 2. That says, What causes it? That means what creates this problem. So let us see the sample answer. Of course, the culprit to blame for such deforestation can squarely fall upon the urbanization efforts of our local city government, which is trying to construct more and more buildings for commercial purposes. Some new buildings are also being erected in order to accommodate the rising population who are moving into our city for better life and better employment opportunities. Then also the trees on both sides of the roads which were planted a long time ago as a part of city beautification effort are also gone to make the roads even wider. So, in essence, people like me feel that it is an all-out attack on our city ecosystem, which was saving it for a long time, in the name of some so-called urbanization and modernization. Here, as you can see, I have given all the information that I had to justify the question by describing the situation and connecting the information. Now, let us see the answer to the last cue card question, that is, what people feel about the problem and explain what you think could be done to solve it. So here, I need to tell the problems and solutions to stop or control the situation. The answer goes like, also, in order to stop this environmental problem or deforestation, the local city government must take a comprehensive plan to plant more trees in a ring that surrounds our entire city. Besides, city dwellers should also be encouraged or even be given incentives to plant any kind of trees on whatever empty space they have in their front yard or backyard. Finally, people can also plant different kinds of trees on their rooftops to increase the number of living trees in their city. Now, as you can see that I have used the range of different grammatical structures, relevant vocabulary, and the speech was fluent overall. It was easy for the examiner to understand this kind of cue card. So, this is how you should frame and present your speech in order to score higher. Now, let us see another example. The prompt is, describe a teacher from the past whom you remember. And the cue questions are, what class the teacher taught you and how old you were. Second one is, what subject he or she taught you. And the last one says, what this teacher's special qualities were. Now, let us see the sample answer for this. But this time, I will give the entire speech all together and you can see the bullet points that are used to differentiate the answers for each cue question. Also, don't forget to refer the bold characters. So the answer is, throughout my academic life, I found and came into contact with several teachers whom I will never forget, mostly because of their personality and quality teaching. Such a teacher who I remember clearly was Mr. Arthur, who taught us history at our 8th grade. I was then about 13 to 14 years old and was in class 8. He had an admiring personality and a different way of teaching. He was very punctual and honest and inspired us to be so. He never pressurized us on studying and always told us stories about different historical events. In his classes, we never felt bored. He had a gift of making the lessons interesting and attracting students to his stories. Thus, much of the history I now know is because of him. My major was science, and I have not studied history that much, but whatever interest I grew on history was mostly his contribution. I can still recall the stories I heard from him. He never misbehaved with any of his students, and all of his students admired him very much. I learned later on that he was an honest and benevolent man in his personal life. I still remember him because he was a good man, a wise mentor, and a nice person who taught us things that we still remember. I suggest you to try the same cue card by using the vocabulary and connectors used by me. Now you can see some questions for practice on your screen. While you answer, always remember that you should give your own answers. Be creative. If you use mugged up answers, there is a chance that you may lose scores. So, be natural and creative. Now, please pause the video and practice by giving answers. So, this brings us to the last part of this lecture, that is, tips to improve your speaking in part 2. As you can see on your screen, first one is read the card carefully. When I say carefully, I expect you to read each and every word written on the card. Next, write a plan. Even if you think that you are totally familiar with what you will speak, it is always a good idea to write a plan. Another tip is to record yourself while you practice. That will help you to identify and correct your errors. Transcribe what you said. That means prepare the script of what you said to identify your grammatical errors and then improve your answer. And finally, use complex vocabulary, which never gets old. I hope this lecture is understood by everyone. If you have any queries related to whatever is discussed so far, please write in the comment section below. We will respond at our earliest convenience. Thank you for joining with us. I will see you in the next class.